Hello and welcome to session 2 of Smart Reading Intervention Mastery. And congratulations, because if you're here, that means that you have implemented what we discussed in the last session. And hopefully you're actually seeing some impact. You've made the text bigger and they're suddenly doing better. You can actually measure that with the reading age assessment with those students. If you make the text bigger, their reading age goes up. If you make it smaller, it goes down. Amazing. So this is what it's all about, implementation, and that's what we'll be hammering again and again, is you've got to get going. And today's such an exciting day as well, because if you find one of these students and then you coach them in the way we described, you can see them transformed literally in minutes. And our record so far is 5 years of reading age gain in less than a month. Pretty spectacular, isn't it? So really exciting, and of course we're bringing these early wins to you so that you really develop this belief that different results are possible, and it's worth engaging more and more, implementing more and more, seeing more and more results week by week. We want to make you so excited just waiting for the next week. That's our goal with all of this. So let's get into the material and get stuck in. Let's start with a little recap of what we covered last week. So first of all, what is a smart intervention process? You're going to map where you're starting from, exactly in the head of the neural connections that are happening in the head of the learner. You need to know how that is going to change for success so that they can be progressing again at the normal pace. And you need to know the tools that are going to achieve that change. So when we did the intervention journey last week for poor vision, first of all, we wanted to identify the fact that there was a visual problem and the exact cause of that visual difficulty. We then wanted to bring the situation where they're seeing the text clearly again. That's the role of this intervention, is that they can see the text clearly so that they can progress normally. And we wanted to implement the right tool to achieve that. So just quickly in the chat, tell me what the 3 tools were. One for focus on the retina, one for contrast sensitivity, and there are 2 or 3 options for weak eye tracking. Quickly put what you remember from the last session into the chat so that we're working this knowledge, but making it more and more embedded. That's what implementation does. Interaction and implementation embeds the knowledge in a very different way to just sitting listening to it. So for poor focus, you need to do an eye test, and if there's a problem there, go and see the optician and get some glasses. If there is contrast sensitivity, you put the plastic overlay to change the white to some other color. And for weak eye tracking, we recommend the eye exercise routine for the long-term solution, a black marker pen for a quick improvement, and then increase the size of the text if that's not enough. Great. So let's get on to today's new material. Who are we going to be looking at? So these students can read accurately. You can hear them reading accurately without a problem. But when they read a paragraph, especially when they read it silently, often they come out with very low comprehension, or they have to read it several times to get that comprehension. And usually it's still a bit shaky. So what is going on? First of all, have you seen that type of student? And has it ever been explained to you what is going on and what can you do about it? What you can do about it? Have you got a rapid solution to this? And by rapid, I mean minutes. To understand this, we need to get into a bit of actual neurology. Now, it's going to be quite simple, don't worry, and it is simplified as well. Everything that we present on how the brain works is simplified, so it's schematic really. But here's the brain. It's looking to the left. You can see the eyes looking off to our left, and the eyes, as I said, are sort of part of the brain. Well, they're definitely part of the brain. They're actually within the capsule of the brain. So here are the little bits of the brain that really matter to us. So we've got the auditory, working around from the bottom, we've got the auditory cortex sort of in from your left ear. We've got this little thing called the letterbox cortex just to behind it. And then right at the back of the brain, you've got the visual cortex, which is much bigger than I'm showing here. It's sort of the back third of the brain virtually. And then above all of those, you've got this thing called Wernicke's area. We'll go into Wernicke in a moment. And at the front, you've got the prefrontal lobe, which is where you do all your clever stuff. So what does reading look like in the brain? Well, we know it starts in the eyes, doesn't it? And the eyes transmit images to the visual cortex through the optic nerves. So the visual cortex is recognizing the letters on the page. The visual cortex passes that information to the letterbox cortex. And the letterbox cortex does something very clever. It looks at the letters in a word and calculates the likely grapheme to phoneme correspondences. So it has this GPC database, and it will pass the phonemes that it thinks are in that word to the auditory cortex. So now we've gone from a visual signal to an auditory signal, and you should begin to actually hear the sounds of the words in your head. There should be a little voice in your head as you read. And the auditory cortex passes that little voice to Wernicke's area. So Wernicke was a neurologist back in the day who had a patient who lost the ability to understand the spoken word. The patient could still speak, but couldn't understand your reply. And when the patient eventually died, Wernicke did the autopsy and found that this little bit of sort of above and around the auditory cortex was where the lesion had been in his stroke, and so presumed that this was the center for speech comprehension. So Wernicke's area then passes the signal to the prefrontal lobe, where you think about what you're reading, or in the spoken word, what you've heard. So you're going from visual to auditory to semantic, and then that is the whole reading process path complete. So let's just quickly go through that again. So we go from the eyes to the visual cortex. Where do we go next? We're going to the letterbox cortex. From the letterbox cortex, we go to the auditory cortex. And from the auditory cortex, we go to Wernicke's area for comprehension. And from Wernicke's area, we go to the frontal lobe, where you ponder what you are reading. Okay. So we know that the student has poor comprehension. Therefore, which bit of the cortex, of this chain of cortex, is not being engaged? You'll begin to see how the more you understand this neurology, the easier it is to understand what's going on, and the easier it is to know what the right intervention is. So it's Wernicke's area, isn't it, that is not engaged, and therefore comprehension is not happening. So what is the low comprehension intervention journey? Our starting point is we've got no internal vocalization of the words. These students cannot hear the words as they read them, so they don't have the little voice, and therefore Wernicke's area is getting no input. We need the student to hear the little voice in their head as they read, so we need them to actually work on creating that little voice. The question is, how can we help them do that? And you can see now that once we know where we're starting from, what the problem is, we know what we've got to achieve for the intervention, actually the solution really becomes sort of obvious, really, doesn't it? So we use vocalization coaching. So we explain what's going on to the student. I will explain the different bits of cortex and say that they're doing everything right, but they need to pass the signal to their Wernicke's area, their comprehension cortex, which is waiting to hear spoken words. They need to literally voice those words to that cortex so that they can understand it. And they can either do it like that, or they can imagine they've got a little audience in their head, so that they're reading to the audience. It sort of can depend a little bit on the age of the student as to how you explain this to them. But one way or another, they need to practice voicing the words in their head. And sometimes you need to say, can you say in your head, my name is David? And just let them think about that voicing that they can do in their head. And then you will know that this is working, because you will instantly start to see their comprehension improving. And as we're coaching them, we start working on that sentence by sentence. We get them to read a sentence, and then, often the sentence will have a question or something. We get them to answer the question without reading the sentence, the question out. We get them to answer it. And if they can do that, then we know that their comprehension is improving. So here is some examples of this in action, and it's very surprising when you see it.
Cat, hug, gate, stand, house. Possible, snakeskin, attachment, grateful, roundabout. Fug, dab, grace, shard, braid. There no four was, even these were.
What we want to do is, could you just read this section through just silently in your head? And it's a question, there are three possible answers, so you just got to pick one answer. Could you just read it through and see which you think is the best, which is the answer to choose?
The first one.
Okay, let me read them to you. So these ones are not great to use. That's number one. Number two, this is the best choice of the three. And number three, these ones are almost as good too. Which sounds like the best choice when I read them to you?
Number two.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And that is session 2 done. It's very simple, isn't it? Not a complex one. I hope that looking at that neurology has been interesting for you. We'll be referring to that over time, and it becomes a tool. Effectively, that understanding you have will really help you to remember what's going on and be identifying these patterns. So we can give you sheets showing patterns and the cause and the solution, but the more it's embedded in you, the more it's just a core knowledge, clearly the easier it is to get this right. Because there's a key thing here, and that is that I'm going to be showing you pattern by pattern individually. And sometimes you'll see a student just with the isolated single pattern, but sometimes there's more than one pattern going on at once. It's where it gets a little bit more complicated, and potentially you can look upon that as more fun. It becomes like a detective story where you're spotting all these different clues, and then you need to be bringing 2 or 3 elements together in order to get the solution. Because here's the thing, is that you can't you can't just do half of this. If you leave a student with one of these causes of difficulty unresolved, then they still can't read. So you need to cover the whole waterfront to make sure you get it. And as I say, often it's sort of 2 or 3. Very occasionally you'll get a student, with 5 or 6 different patterns, and and then of course you're working quite hard to get that full solution. But often it's 1, 2, 3, and we can help with that. We can roll through these early interventions with you, so that you're seeing those early results, and everyone starts to believe in what's possible. That's part of our goal is to change what people believe is possible in reading intervention, because you will know that traditionally reading interventions have taken so long and been so inconsistent that a lot of senior leadership teams will look at it and say, I really want to find a solution for this student, but we just cannot afford to run endless interventions which don't deliver results. And that is why this really substantial cohort of students goes through year after year, without a solution. And that's what we want to change. That's our mission. And we know it's possible. So, part of my duty is to be sharing this with you so that you believe it's possible and can start to see these results. So your task for the week is to find this student who's bright, who can read, but just isn't getting anything from it. And so it feels like they're not doing the reading. They are doing the reading, they're just not getting the comprehension. So when you have one of them, you can then coach them on hearing the words in their head and start to see their comprehension literally lift as they do it. And sometimes it's like a light going on in their head when they suddenly start to hear the voice. They start to feel that comprehension happening instantly. And so it's very exciting for them. And of course, they've just not understood why they couldn't understand what they're reading. It was just like, I'm doing the reading as I was taught, and I know my friend is understanding what he's read, but I'm not, and I just don't know why, of course. So find that student, do some coaching, see if you can see an instant effect, and then just tell us how that's been going. And if you literally cannot find a single student like that, that's fine. Just send that message to us. Look after yourself, and I hope it goes well.